In the first part, we studied the basis of mysticism. In the second part, we discussed attaining the mystical consciousness. And now, although we can never really say that we have assimilated it all, we certainly have come to a point where we can at least intelligently discuss the third section, which is living the mystical way. Something reminds me that 3 years ago, I wrote the president of Stanford University after having received complaints from several students down there that they couldn't buy the Goldsmith books at Stanford. And within a week or two, the president replied and said to me that he checked the library there, and he was told that there were no requests for the books, and so they didn't stock them. This book by Joel here, a Parenthesis, is probably the most important book written in the 20th century. It is as important as any book that science will ever put out, or any documents by the church. It is actually a continuation of that spirit which went into the formation of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. That spirit, which was lost during the intervening years, is in this book. And if you know Joel, if you know his integrity, you know that the consciousness which wrote this book is the divine consciousness. We have here, and this would sound ridiculous to the world at large, we have here a message from the Father, delivered through the enlightened consciousness of Joel, which was a transparency for that message. And that book of the Father should be in every library around the world. Someday you can be sure that it will. In order for Joel to write to us and tell us the meaning of living the mystical way, it was necessary for him to first live that way. And having done so, he could give us a first-hand report of the meaning. Now, this is different than living the metaphysical way. For the metaphysical way in itself never becomes the mystical way. It is living by the letter. The mystical way is the complete freedom from this world, an independence which steps out of the three-dimensional world while living in it, becomes at one with the source of all life, and becomes independent of the mind, the body, the circumstances and conditions of this world, independent of normal material needs, independent of every man, every person, every so-called power and force in this world. In other words, living the mystical way is the independence that was written about in the Declaration of Independence, with something added. It is not an independence from other nations. It goes deeper. It is an independence from the false human selfhood, including our own false human selfhood. It is a total freedom in Christ. When Jesus said destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up again, he was revealing something that we have never discussed. The meaning of those 3 days. You will find that the fourth dimension of consciousness, being Christ consciousness, he still had 3 more levels of consciousness to rise up to the 7th level, at which level his ascension would be complete, at which level he could come forth again. The 3 days are 3 levels of consciousness, and that will tell you then that the 6 days of creation before the 7th day of rest are not days. They have nothing to do with human time. They have to do with levels of consciousness. And the first level was light. God said, "Let there be light." And because God spoke in tongues, there was light. And who was that light if not you? That light was the beginning of the divine image and likeness of the Father. And really, there never was a time when that light did not exist. And from that light, all has evolved. In the 7 levels of consciousness, we come to a level which is more or less midway. The human level. The 3rd dimension of consciousness. And all of us in that 3rd dimension of consciousness on the way to the 4th are making the turn, the halfway point. At the midway point, we turn from the limited human consciousness to the realization that I am the light. And at this point, we discover that all of the things we had been seeking up to now are to be found in that 4th dimension of consciousness toward which we are heading. There is nothing that has been withheld from us, but rather we were separated from that which we are by a thin filament called human thought. That filament, that glass darkly, was between the human form and the divine substance. As we come out of 3D into 4D, we find a miracle. We find that in the 3rd dimension, all form is without substance. It is nothing but form walking around. It has no substance. It has no spiritual content. Just that minor degree to keep it there. And we find that 4D is the level of substance. And we discover what we have missed and why. We discover that in Eden there were 2 trees. The tree of substance and the tree of form. The tree of life and the tree of good and evil. The tree of allness and the tree of lack and limitation. The tree of reality and the tree of imitation. And now we find there is a thing called substance. And in the living of the mystical way, you live in the substance and let the form take care of itself. There is a strange thing about this substance. It is invisible manifest form. And then that invisible manifest form becomes visible tangible form. Whereas the forms of the 3rd dimension have no invisible root. They are really disembodied forms without substance, existing only in mentality. And as you reach for them and possess them, you possess the shadow. Not knowing this, we have tried to improve these forms. We have done everything we can to build those forms, to store those forms. to possess them, to contain them, to preserve them. And they were not our forms at all. They were but borrowed for the moment. Only when we have the substance of 4D do we control the form in 3D. And that makes a drastic improvement in our life. It makes the improvement we had been trying to make, but couldn't make, because without substance we merely could recreate new forms that were temporal, transient, evanescent, futile. Now, every error that you have encountered, whether it be of the mind, the body, or the emotions, or the possessions, has been a lack of the substance of four-dimensional consciousness. I know this seems like a fine time to find it out. We go so far, and then suddenly into our range of understanding comes something we feel we could have known earlier if someone had pointed it out to us. But somehow, in the divine sequence of things, the apple must fall off the tree when it is ripe. And we cannot be given certain things until we are prepared. It's as if there's a power that prevents us from receiving that which we are unprepared to receive. But as the preparation is completed, the apple of wisdom falls off the vine and we have it. If we know that fourth dimensional consciousness provides the substance, then we can learn to stop seeking in the three-dimensional realm, like a dog chasing its tail. We begin to turn our total attention on the fourth dimension, and now we know why we cannot and must not and shall not take thought for our life, because our concept of life was this form. And while we were taking thought for it, we were putting that thought between the form and the substance which that form needed, but which we were not feeding to that form because we did not seek that food which was the Word of the Father. The tree of allness is the tree of life. And if somebody steals your fruit, it will not matter. That same tree of life will produce new fruit. There will always be an invisible crop coming forth. If someone steals your fruit in the third dimension, you may have a very barren time. Your complete crop is gone. But in the fourth dimension, nobody steals your tree. And the consciousness of substance is the tree. The consciousness of form is only the fruit. And false fruit it is. So now we're going to live in an awareness that I am the substance of God. And as that substance, all that the Father hath is mine unto eternity. I have no need from any person, from any condition, from anything. Nothing is my supplier. Like a tree, I grow my own fruit. All of it comes forth from the withinness of consciousness. Withinness unfolds to withoutness. The inner unfolds to the outer. You depend on your inner substance to unravel itself like a spider. And this inner substance is divine consciousness, and I and divine consciousness are one. This inner substance has a brain. It knoweth my needs. It goeth before me. It performeth. It perfecteth. It is the living Spirit of God which I am. And there is no duality here. There is no seeking here. There is no striving here. When we sought and found the kingdom of God within, our days of seeking were over. When you find what you seek, your days of seeking are no more. And if you are still seeking, it is because you have been unwilling to accept your identity. When you have accepted your identity, what is there to seek? Son, all that I have is thine. In your identity, you have all that the Father hath, and now you're ready to live the life of independence. A gentleman said to me, the one thing that eludes me, even though I can now feel this rising within me, I can feel this essence moving forth, is that I'm seeking illumination. And that's the one thing that eludes me. I cannot find illumination. And I had to shake my head sadly and say, you never will. Well, he says, did you? I said, no, I didn't find it either. Oh, he said, I thought you found it. No, I said, I've never found illumination. But I've done one thing. I got rid of the fellow who was looking for it. I discovered that to tune in, you have to tune out. That when you tune out of this world, you don't have to seek anything, not even the light. Because in seeking the light, you are denying that you are the light. You cannot be illuminated. You are the light itself. All who seek illumination are unaware that they are the light of the Father. The real illumination is the realization that I am. When you tune out of the world of form, when you tune out of trying to find the light, lo and behold, you never had to find it, you had to accept it. For that is your name. When you are given the white stone with a new name on it, it will tell you, you are the Son of God, the light. The Father said, let there be light, and there was. And that was the perfect divine image. And nothing has changed. You are that light. It is the acceptance of the light which is the real illumination. Oh, it may take place in a physical sense after that. You may be engulfed by this transforming light. But there must first be an acceptance. We can't walk the streets hoping that this is Damascus and lightning bolts are going to strike. We prepare the way. We come out of the atheism of non-belief. Out of the atheism which says, the Father may have said I am the light, but I haven't yet realized it. We come into the faith of acceptance. And then we pass the faith of acceptance as the substance begins to move through us, revealing itself, illuminating our way. And then you discover that this light moving through you is the fourth dimensional light that governs the three-dimensional form. This fourth dimensional light becomes the law of your being. It enables you to relax in the knowledge that there is no power external to your being. None. And as this awareness ascends within you, all external power, which is darkness, is met by the cold, bright light of your being. And every external power becomes a non-evil. Not an evil that you resist, but a non-evil. A non-reality. You cannot meet it mentally. You cannot meet it with willpower. You have risen to the point where there is nothing to meet. That is a difficult place, isn't it? Where there is nothing to meet. For I am that power which is the light of God. And in this light, in this self-accepted, you are living the mystical life of relaxing in the power of God, which is the non-power of the world. You are relaxing in the need for no power whatsoever, for all power is now in the self that you are. You can face the pain. You can face all forms of persecution. You can face the disturbances. You can face those things which are in your mind and your body, and those things which seem external to your mind and your body, with the knowledge that God is all self. And only this transforming light of non-power needed reveals the hypnosis of error. We will coin a word or two, and the words we will coin are these. You have learned about omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience. Now learn that there is omnipresent infinity, that the fullness, the sum total of God, which is infinity, is functioning at every point in the universe. There is no point where infinity is not present. That means the fullness of God, present at every point, is the law, the reality. And there is no power anywhere, no presence anywhere, no being, no condition, no situation, and no person who can change it. That awareness is your mystical consciousness. And that awareness is the state of consciousness which can never be hypnotized by a seeming external circumstance. It can look at the circumstance. You can still see the activities that are taking place in three dimensions. Jesus did. Jesus saw all that we saw. The difference being that while he saw them, while he saw these problems, many of which were far greater than any we have encountered, he could also see through them. The three-dimensional vision saw them, the four-dimensional vision saw through them. Saw them as what they are. And although it may be difficult to come to that conclusion, he saw them as forms without substance. And the reason he could see them as forms without substance is because he knew their substance. Their substance was the substance of God. And that substance could not become an imperfect form. He saw the filament between substance and form, the glass darkly, which prevented the pure perfect substance from coming through into pure perfect form, the density of human thought. He saw the world mind intervene between substance and form. He saw the individual mind hypnotized to accept that separation. But in his mystical consciousness, he knew the non-power of that world mind, the non-power of the substanceless forms that it created. He saw them as wraiths, walking, shadows. And he knew that behind them, where they were, their true substance was Christ, perfect and immaculate and eternal. And he sowed not to the form but to the substance, not to the flesh but to the spirit. He lived in the tree of allness, and not the tree of good and evil. Your consciousness, when it is the tree of allness, and not the tree of good and evil, will admit no possibility of opposites, no possibility of a conflicting power to God. And knowing that infinity is omnipresent, that God stands where the problem appears, that is where you make your decision in consciousness to sow to God and not to the problem, which means you stand on the fact that only the power of God can be, and that which is not the power of God expressing must be imaginary. Totally imaginary, no matter how real it appears to the three-dimensional mind. Now, once you have developed this technique of standing in the realization of the non-reality of all that is not expressing the perfection of God, you will not try to improve the non-reality. You will realize the only hope there is for non-reality to be dissolved lies in you. You are the one hope in the universe for the person you think is suffering to come out of it. Without you, that will continue. Your illumined consciousness is the only hope there is. That is the one hope in the world for the people you love and the conditions that oppress you. Your illumined consciousness. Without it, the rest of the world and you continue in forms without substance. With it, even though it is difficult to establish, you must make that beginning. For to live the mystical way is to accept no opposite to God. None. And the place where you do not accept it is in your consciousness. I and the Father can never be two states of consciousness. Is God permitting a condition to exist that is unlike God? And if your answer is no, then the answer must follow and say, then the condition does not exist. Now what am I going to do about it if it doesn't exist? What can you do about non-existence? You must cross it out in your consciousness. As long as it is in your consciousness, it will remain externalized. You cross non-existence out of your consciousness. Now suppose this non-existence were a pain in your foot. How would you cross it out? You would have to stand in the courtyard as Jesus stood, and in consciousness know the truth which makes you free. The truth must be that God is not coming to pick me up here and put me on a cross, and therefore no one is doing it. It isn't being done. There is no me standing here that can be put up on a cross. God wouldn't permit it. There is no me standing here that can be pained. God wouldn't permit it. If there's a me standing here in pain, it's a false identity. I must deny myself. This is a strange way to live, isn't it? To deny yourself instead of the pain. There is no me here who can have pain. The me that is feeling pain is non-existent. God would not permit pain. God would not permit suffering. God would not permit death. God would not permit avalanches to swallow up people. God would not permit tidal waves. God would not permit fires that burn people. Do you see, we are denying the false self. We're going beyond denying the fire, the flame, and the flood. We're denying the false self that is taken up in these things. And what will come of that denial? In your denial of the false self, in your dying to that false self, you are giving the light of your being an opportunity to be born. It cannot be born while there is a false you still alive. The light that you are seeking to destroy your enemies cannot rise up and dissolve the darkness, because you are standing beneath the darkness and the light. You are the obstacle. Your unwillingness to release the false self. You cannot live the mystical way in a human personality, in a human selfhood, in a self that is still governed by fear and doubt, in a self that still thinks of life in terms of birth and death. That self is the self that is in the way. That self is the self that suffers. That self is the self that sees problems external to itself and wonders, what can I do? You can never know the release of the light until the darkness of the false self is overcome. Then you discover that which you were trying to defend against, that which you were trying to avoid or improve out there, was only the evidence of your false selfhood. When Jesus died to self, the world of false selfhoods outside of him was now dead to him. It cannot be alive to you when you are dead to the false self. For now you come into a new kingdom in which the infinite substance of God is the only self. And you learn that the forms in the external are the imitation of that substance. The forms are the mental concepts we entertain about the invisible substance. The substance is life, the form is imitation of life. To be in the world and not of it, one must live in the substance, and then the form in the world will be under the government of the substance. Meanwhile, you're more concerned, of course, with the pressures of the moment. And those pressures remain only as evidence that you are still in form without substance. It's better to face this, to hear it, than not to know it, and to wonder what you're going to do about the pressures. Again, you must be reminded that there are no pressures external to yourself. All pressures in this world are but the evidence, and in proportion to your separation from God, that evidence appears. If your separation is slight, the pressures are slight. If your separation from God is great, the pressures are great. And rather than pat each other on the back and tell each other how wonderful we are, the best service we can do for each other is to know the truth. When the separation from God is eliminated, by some strange magic, the pressures are eliminated too. All work is done within. Your inner and your outer are one and the same. You may not know it. You may debate it. You may wonder, how can my inner be the outer when the outer seems to be so many other people? I don't control those people. How can my inner be related to those people out there? That's exactly why we have to find a way not to live in the concepts of our human mind, because to our human mind, that seems to be an insoluble problem. The human mind sees my inner didn't make that tree grow over there, and my inner didn't make that boy over there get the mumps. And the human mind is right, it didn't. But when your inner is a different inner than a human inner, if that boy over there who has the mumps happens to be your son, you'll discover he doesn't have the mumps. And you'll discover that tree over there is influenced by your consciousness if it happens to be in your backyard. You'll discover that your inner awareness of the one self will improve your garden. You'll discover there is a relationship between your inner state of being and those things which are in relation to you. And the closer they are, the more that inner self of you will govern your relationship with those individuals and those conditions. Now you say, how can I know when I am illuminated? Or at least becoming so? And the answer Joel gives us is when you are in a state of desirelessness. When you find that there is a capacity in you to desire no improvements in the outer, no things, no conditions, no possessions. That doesn't say you're going to reject them when they come. It simply says that you have no external desire. You don't spend any of your time seeking to fulfill desires for the external. Rather, you know that if I want a tree, I'm going to plant a seed. And so I'm going to plant seeds of consciousness. Your complete direction is within. You know that as you control the inner, and then lose control of the inner and let the spirit take dominion, your outer can only be a spiritual outer. It will be a perfect manifestation of the spiritual realization within. And you're not saying to God, there's still a person out there that needs my help. You're saying to God, thank you, Father, for being the substance of my being and His being. For we are one and the same consciousness, and my form is showing that forth. His form is not, but I will rest in the truth and watch the one consciousness reveal itself in both forms. I can't influence that person if the consciousness of that person is established. But if that person happens to be a child, that consciousness is still mine. And also, if that person happens to be quite elderly, it is coming back to the child consciousness. Again, it can be your consciousness. Your consciousness becomes the governing factor when a person is too young or too old or unable to do its own work. I mean by that, it's in a coma, or in a state of insanity, or in a state of inabilities due to amnesia. It becomes like a child consciousness. And then as you dwell in the consciousness of reality, you will discover your consciousness becomes the governing consciousness, provided you are not exerting ill will, not trying to in any way make somebody good or well. Your consciousness must be the free flowing of the Father. In other words, you must crucify your human self-consciousness in order for your consciousness to have power. Then, without manipulation, without direction, without will, the divine will coming through you becomes the divine will. in the child or elderly person. It is the absence of you which makes this possible. That makes you a transparency for the divine. And the transcendental moves through you because now you are enlightened. And that enlightenment embraces those who have no consciousness themselves. They become your enlightened consciousness, and the will of the Father expresses in them to the need of the moment. I'm quite certain that whoever does this successfully, by accepting themselves as the light, and then knowing that no person has the power to direct the light, permits the light to work without the obtrusion of a human personality, will notice the power of it flowing. And then the mystical life will be expressing in the perfection of God in all things. Now, as we begin to feel substance, knowing that substance is divine, we have a tree with the strangest fruit the world has ever seen. Most trees will give one fruit and multiply that fruit. This tree bears infinite fruit and multiplies these infinite fruits infinitely, so that we are the very tree of life itself. And who would ever think of talking to a tree and saying, please give me pears or give me apricots? Who would ever think of talking to the tree of life and telling it what you want, when already you know it hath all of the Father? And this tree of life truly is your consciousness in the mystical way. And the mystical way, it really is so misnamed. It should be the realistic way, the real way, the true way, the honest way, the way it is. That's all the mystical way is, the way it is. For when you are the tree of life, the isness of God is ising as you, flowing, forming itself as harmony, peace, love, contentment, immortality. Immortality must be seen as a permanent state of consciousness which exists right now. When the form goes, this state of consciousness, this immortal consciousness, continues to unfold, to expand to infinity, if you have attained the realization of it before the form goes. If not, then the mortal consciousness comes right back to its very same limited state when the form goes. Crucifixion is a very strange word. We have all assumed that Jesus was crucified to demonstrate that there is no real death. And although that is partly true, I would like you to see something in crucifixion that may not have occurred to you, that it has many meanings. And one of them is the reenactment through the crucifixion of Jesus of exactly what you and I have already done to ourselves. We have crucified our own self. We were not successful because it still exists. But just as the world crucified Jesus unsuccessfully, we have done the same to our own self. We did it by being born. In that birth, we crucified ourself. We were born into a sense of time and into a sense of form. And in accepting the form, we lost the substance. We didn't lose it. We lost the use of it. It still is our substance. And all those that we know and love, that substance is still their substance. Who is going to recognize that for them? Who is going to recognize that the substance of God is the substance of the individual for whom we mourn, for whom we fear, for whom we suffer pain. And do you see how in denying that substance as the substance of another, you have denied the allness of divine substance, and you have lost it for yourself. And now the blind are trying to help the blind. I hope you recognize that these are words of love. They're not words of criticism. They're words of great love. They're words which are coming to us so that we can cease being the blind who want to help the blind and accept divinity as the substance of all those whom we think need help. Accept it then as the substance of all those who are in pain, of all those who are suffering, of all those throughout the world that we think are blind, deaf, lame, halt, and withered. Accept their divinity within your consciousness. For these are the least of these, my brethren. And don't you see that unless you accept it for them, the same measure of unacceptance is meted out unto you? You have sliced a piece of God off over here and say, I have it, they don't. It isn't true. There is no place in the universe where the substance of God is not. And that substance simply has not come through an enlightened consciousness to show forth as the harmony of form. You're wasting your time trying to work on the form when you must learn to live in the substance. And the substance is not out there. Infinity, the fullness of it, is right in your consciousness. All work is done right where you are. In your living room, in your automobile, in your office, hid in your closet is where the work is done. It is there that you accept the infinity of divine substance and thus overcome the world. Every person in this world who is suffering is a teaching to us. It's like a true or false. Is this true or is this false? And every suffering that we encounter is that question, is this true or is this false? The answer must always be false. And if the answer is false, are you going to now try to improve that which isn't there, which your very answer of falseness attests to? Or will you get into consciousness and make the adjustment? This is the Spirit of God, the substance of God. I am the substance of God. We are one substance. And now you've plugged the leak. And the next thing is silence. Silence is prayer. The silence of the mind. The silence of the false human consciousness. The silence of the claims of the form. The resting. And this is the acceptance that only God is power, and my silence is paying tribute to that power. My silence is putting up the sword that wanted to go out there and help, that wanted to help God, that wanted to help divine substance, when all I had to do was recognize it. And by recognizing it, I know it needs no help. I am now accepting God's omnipresence. I am saying, thank you, Father, for enlightening me to see not what I saw as form, but to see through it as thy substance, invisible substance, not visible to a human mind, only to the enlightened consciousness which accepts divinity everywhere. Now I am not a false witness. I am finally the Son of God. For I accept my Father as the only presence on the earth. Now I am glorifying the Father. Joel made a very beautiful statement in this book here. He said that never has a drug been invented that could help the life of God, or that could help God life in this universe. That every drug that has ever been used has helped only the animal life, but it has not touched the life of God. By the same token, no surgeon has ever operated on the life of God. No X-ray machine has ever peeped in to the life of God. The world has lived on the outside in the forms, and we, through grace, are being led into the inner life, the substance which ultimately we will see is the only way to govern the form. Each day, many times, we are called upon to release the forms of this world. Each day we are called upon to consciously release all forms in this world from their non-reality. To release in ourselves our own experiences in form. To release the desire to hold on to the manner of yesterday. There is a constant flow of light unfolding within you. Yesterday, in human yesterday, infinity flowed within you. Today, infinity flows within you. There's nothing in it that you need hold. Infinity tomorrow will flow within you. And as you feel this rhythm of infinity flowing within you, you have a freedom that cannot be bought with $1 million. This is a kind of freedom that says every possible need is flowing and being fulfilled from the very depth of my being. For this is the mind of God functioning flawlessly where I stand. I need take no thought for my life. I dare not. For in taking thought I would be denying the omnipresent grace of the Father. Can you think for a moment of how you would feel to have such a freedom? Where nothing in this universe could happen to come through the human antenna of the mind, to provoke it into a state of fear, or doubt, or worry. Isn't that the Christ mind? Where we are no longer a human antenna? That is the kind of freedom which we must strive to accept. In the measure that you have accepted your divinity and the omnipresence of divinity, you have by now witnessed certain degrees of that freedom, certain fruits of the Spirit. Surely a sufficient degree of fruitage to warrant your now making a greater step and removing all belief in any human selfhood on this earth. Why can we not trust the living Spirit of God to reveal itself where we have removed the mask of false belief? We are being given a gift greater than human life. That was just a loan anyway. It's taken back. We borrowed it. We are being given a gift that is not a loan. We have already received that gift. It wasn't as prettily gift-wrapped, so we didn't notice it. But it was invisibly gift-wrapped. When a person understands that only Christ is their self, why would that person ever accept another selfhood than Christ? Why would we ever sow to the flesh when we know that spirit is my name? Why would we permit the flesh to be governed by a false state of mind if we knew that God present is the law of harmony unto my being? Do we distrust God or we distrust ourselves? In the mystical way, to a measure, we have overcome the false state of human selfhood which we dragged around for these many years. We can look back at it and we can see the shell that posed as life. We can see the mistakes that occurred in that shell because the absence of divine substance in the realization of that shell left it a prey to the laws of chance. We can learn lessons from that. The prime one being that each thing that happened to me in the past was a teacher which led up to this moment of realization. That henceforth I shall not know myself after the flesh, nor any other. But recognizing the flesh for what it is, I will see through it as well, like a mirage on the desert, and know that there stands the perfection of God being, unrealized by the human shell. We can go that far. That's no problem. But after that realization, we do not seem to know what to do. And we try, as it were, to push our realization into someone else, to try to make that realization come true in them. You can't do it. You can do only one thing and no more. And it's good to know so that you won't waste your time and effort trying to do more than you can. The greatest thing you can do for this world and for yourself is to rectify the crucifixion of the Christ which you once perpetrated upon yourself before you came into human birth. Rectify that crucifixion. Remove that cross from your true self. You can't do any more. That is the greatest. That is the highest level of attainment possible to man. Remove the crucifixion of the Christ and let it shine. It will do all the work you've been trying to do. It will run your house, your business, your life, your relationships. It will completely enact for you the perfection of the divine image and likeness, and do for all those you love more than your human hands and hearts could ever do. Uncrucify. Accept self and watch. Watch infinity move through you. Watch the fruit come through the tree in variety, shapes, and colors you never dreamed of. Watch the rainbow of life. Now this is what the mystical way is all about. It's effortless living. That's not to be confused with laziness. It's effortless in the sense that there is no labor to the doing. It's as if you were trying to write a composition and you struggled for 4 hours, and when it was all through, all you had was a waste paper basket full of torn up paper. Nothing seemed to gel. But in your acceptance of self, lo and behold, there comes a moment of inspiration when your hands are not your own, and they're flowing with the pen or the typewriter, and the words are given to you, and there they are. And in 10, 20, 30 minutes, that which in 4 hours made no sense, you have a fluent expression of a truth. Why? Because there was no human mind there, struggling. It was an effortless expression. And no matter what you're doing, the same thing applies. There is an effortless expression that moves through you when you're letting divinity have its head. Effortless living is a busy life, but it is without the ups and downs, without the opposites. It's not a having today and not having tomorrow. It's not health today and bad health tomorrow. It is oneness forever unfolding from within you. Withinness unfolding. Again, we are finding that when the activity of spirit begins to move through an individual, the degree of that activity is determined by whether that individual remains a person seeking more of the spirit, or realizes that there is no person there to seek the spirit. The seeker is his own barrier. The fourth dimension has no human being seeking anything. It has no seeker. The fourth dimension is pure substance unfolding. And when your consciousness is there, you are pure substance unfolding. And there is no form that will come into your expression that will not reflect that pure substance. Review your life in an instant. And everywhere you have had a difficulty, replace that with pure substance, and you will discover that the life you have led in form has been a bridge to the moment of realization that substance was missing. And this is the uncrucifixion. This is the moment of release from the 3D, the form, the man of flesh, to return to the substance from which we departed in consciousness. We are removing all the nails. All the false concepts that we have nailed ourselves down with. All of the beliefs that the human mind and human body had a capacity to accomplish anything. We are totally emptying ourselves of the belief that humanhood ever was fit to be a vessel for the Father. We are dying to the flesh. And if there's a little funny feeling at the pit of your stomach when you do it, that's a birth pang. Because death and birth are simultaneous. The death to the flesh and the birth of the spirit are two sides of the same coin. The greatest love that you can give any human being on this earth is a love that you do not possess. It is the love of the Father flowing through your enlightened consciousness. And if you truly want to love, you will let that divine love flow through you in the absence of a human selfhood, and that love will embrace the world. Then we become instruments. We become instruments for sharing. What can we share humanly? Transient things. What can we share when we are the allness, the tree of life itself? We can share all that the Father hath to those who are not yet aware of that. We are blessings. We all want to be blessings. We strive to be blessings. But now we must let God be the blessing that we share with the universe. Of our own selves, we have nothing to share. But when God flows through us, we have infinity to share. And so we cannot, in the mystical way, limit ourselves to our limited mentalities. We cannot limit ourselves to our limited capacities or abilities. This would be a form of heresy. To finitize our capacities is to shut out the very infinity of being. And so we can never say, I have not, or I cannot do this, or it is missing, or it is lacking, or this problem is insurmountable. That's the human consciousness talking. And it's basing its expression on its past failures. And its present failure will again be for the simple reason that it has not opened itself to God's capacity, to the infinity of the Father within. And so there is no problem that is insurmountable. It simply is that we're using the wrong capacity. It must be the infinite capacity of God released through our self-admission that of mine own self I can do nothing. It's all yours, Father, all of it, this whole life scheme. I have nothing to do with it but to work hitherto as the Father within does the work. And that Father within, that miracle worker, is myself when the outer man is willing to uncrucify the piercing of the Christ. The question then, how can I tell when I'm living the mystical life, is what do you desire out there? When your answer is nothing, under every circumstance, you are living the mystical life. But there's a boy dying. Do you not desire to save him? No, I do not desire to save him. There's someone starving. Do you not desire to feed them? No, I do not desire to feed them. If God isn't doing it, I can't. Do you see that? If God isn't doing it, you can't. You cannot do more than God is doing. What is God doing? Letting someone starve, letting someone die? Do you really believe that? In the middle of one treatment to a patient, where I was despairing that nothing was being done, there was no response, I thought, oh, what a flop you are. The voice said, don't you recognize me? And that taught me all I had to know. Don't you recognize me? Who are you treating? Were you trying to make someone get well? How foolish can you be? You're looking at a form. Don't you see the substance must be there? Don't you recognize me, said the voice. And from that moment on, I didn't have a patient. I recognized the invisible Father, and that was the end of the patient. We don't have any real claims. We just don't recognize the Father everywhere, especially within ourselves. Now let's try a little quiet. This doesn't mean your soul is quiet, just your awareness of the human selfhood. And your soul, which spans the infinite, is ever present throughout this universe, everywhere. Your soul, released by the quietness of the human mind, will do the work you have striven so hard to do. It will marry the Christ, and from that marriage will be born your new consciousness. The conscious awareness of the ever-present Christ. If you feel yourself being lifted out of your mind, let it be. Don't try to control your feelings. Don't try to hold this down to the level of your mind. Let that mind be dissolved, and if you're pulled right through your skull, let it happen. Until you lose all control. You have absolutely no control of the situation or the thought. You're outside of your human self. Then you're in Christ. Then you are letting the Christ do, be, see for you. And it will remake your universe into the divine image. It will smile where you had been frowning. For it is the light. And when all the human pressures have descended, and you are up there in that light, you find the glory of no thought, the power of not being human. The Father speaks, and the Father's voice is unlike any voice that has ever been uttered on this earth. It is the voice of truth. It is the voice of reality. It is the voice of perfection everywhere in all things, made manifest. It is the mystical fourth dimension of reality. And then you're on your homeward journey. You've passed the middle portion of life. You've turned. You're on your way home. And all that you are seeking is on this way. It is all there, waiting to be your experience. You had left it, and in your return you find it. All that I have is thine. Sometimes you're terrified. You feel yourself being drawn out of your skin. It may be years before it happens again. Don't be afraid. You're not going anywhere. You're simply losing what never was. In a new fourth dimension, you are adding a new level of life to your being. It's more than just another 25%. It's a complete new vista. And the old level is no more. You have new Christ vision. You see differently. You even believe differently, whereas before you saw materially and believed materially, now you don't even believe materially. Your material sense has changed. You can see the unreality of material form. You know that spiritual form is ever manifest right where the material appears. And you know that this manifest spiritual form is invisible to the limited three-dimensional senses. But there, present, and you are accepting it. You are feeling it. You are witnessing what human eyes cannot witness with your new consciousness. And that's when the essence begins to seem to move within you like silver dew. Sometimes you feel like you're ascending, sometimes you feel like it's descending. But it's moving within you, it's alive, and this is the substance, the essence that is going to someday appear out in the outer as form, untarnished by human thought. Everything you are doing now is releasing you from that stagnancy called the human self, and is opening the way to that immortal selfhood, which is a continuing expansion unto infinity for everlasting. The spiritual universe is this fourth dimension. It is the invisible substance, the primal substance, from which the secondary substance called human life is derived. When you live in the primal, in consciousness, you have dominion. It has dominion over the secondary substance called human life. This has been the missing substance of the universe. And although you cannot give it to the world, you can accept it for yourself. It has dominion over every so-called power on this earth without your lifting a finger to exercise that dominion. It is self-enforcing. It works by grace. And you'll know when you have it, because you've already experienced it more than once. To make it a permanent dispensation is the object of this work. To feel it, to be in its presence, to know it is flowing through you, is to relax into my peace. You don't have to guide this essence any more than you guided the invisible water of the atmosphere which became the morning dew on the flower. There it is. And so this essence too crystallizes into the forms that you will need tomorrow. It is working now. While you sleep, it will be working. Consciousness will unfold, lifting you into mansion after mansion. Give it a chance. Trust it. Let us now join in uncrucifying our own being. If there's any shreds of doubts, erase them. Leave nothing there except total acceptance of the pure light of God and the pure power of that light. Leave nothing there, no doubts. Whatever is in consciousness will externalize, so remove every doubt. Your pure consciousness should be only the Father is everywhere, now, regardless of what appears to human eyes. Let that engulf your entire being until it is your consciousness. And that is what will externalize. For it is the truth that makes you free. Now this is what is called standing. When you hold to this truth in your consciousness, you are standing. So appearances can come by, but you stand in this truth. And that's more power than the sword, or the first aid kit, or the surgeon's knife, or the pharmaceuticals, or the mental or physical might of a bomb. One is false power, one is reality, invisibly dominating its universe and manifesting in the outer to confirm, to reward those who walk in the light. Behold, this consciousness makes all things new. If you are faithful to it. And so we've started living the mystical way. And I'm very grateful that we've only started, because this is a good beginning. Thanks very much.